I think the Titanic was sunk on purpose. Okay, so Titanic sank in 1912, and there's a bunch of weird stuff going on. Like, apparently there was some fire on board the ship that was already going before they left, and there was a bunch of radio confusion and people trying to call in the stuff where they could have been warned about the iceberg, and just those messages didn't get through. And there's this weird, in 1898, this guy wrote this novella called Futility, which was about a giant ship called the Titan that was an ocean liner, and it hits an iceberg on the starboard side on an April night, and it sinks. And that's what happened with the Titanic. And it's okay, so that all sounds kooky and crazy. Or why would someone sink a ship? There are reasons. Okay, so who would sink Titanic on purpose? Well, who owned the Titanic? White Star Lines. Who owns White Star Lines? International Mercantile Marine Company. White Star Lines was a wholly owned subsidiary of the International Mercantile Marine Company. And who owned the International Mercantile Marine Company? J.P. Morgan. In school, in history class, sometimes you get a textbook and you gotta, for the chapter, go through all the important keywords and definitions and memorize them. Sometimes teachers have you write down those ones first. And I remember at one point J.P. Morgan was one of the names of notable people that we had to write a definition for, and he was fourth listed after those other people with money. One reason: to get rid of people. There were some high-profile people on the Titanic. It was a big deal when it happened, if I recall, because a lot of people saw that movie. There's this one guy, John Jacob Astor IV, super rich, one of the richest people in the world. Really rich dude. Also, Benjamin Guggenheim, another rich dude. Isidor Straus, a third rich dude. Now, this is one reason I don't think that it was sunk to get rid of these three rich dudes. But maybe it wasn't a ploy to get rid of three rich dudes, but in fact, it was a way to make us think that they got rid of three rich dudes. In fact, Guggenheim was supposed to be on Lusitania, and maybe he was supposed to be on the Lusitania when that sunk many years later. Because of those three guys, one of them was never found. They found the bodies of two of those three men. John Astor, they found his body, and they identified him due to his pocket watch and his initials in his jacket. But who says that was him? They also allegedly got the body of Isidor Straus. How they confirmed it was him, I don't know. Not to mention the ship that went to go collect these bodies, contracted by none other than the White Star Line, owned by J.P. Morgan. So maybe it wasn't to kill those men, but maybe they survived, and they faked their deaths so they could live in the shadows and continue to operate some sort of behind-the-scenes chess playing with the world. But probably not that either. The real reason I think J.P. Morgan might have had those ships sunk. So there's this comedian, and his name is Bill Burr. And he has a joke about how if he was the one who would be in charge of keeping the population low. Like they say that the secret behind the scenes new world order government, the deep state, one of their goals is to control the population. Well, Bill Burr says if he was in charge of that job, he'd sink cruise ships. And that's a real funny bit. I encourage you to listen to it sometime. But what if that's what they used to do? The White Star Line had other ocean liners that sank. Not only was there the Titanic, but there was the Atlantic and the Republic and the Britannic. They all sunk. Sinking cruise ships doesn't get rid of that many people at one time. So people might ask, if that's a way of getting rid of the population, why so small? Well, here's what I think. I think that they have a lot of different methods out there for eliminating people. And they come up with new ones every day. But basically, I think there's a bunch of people in charge of that job, and they all have quotas. So, like, you might have a guy in charge of who has medical related deaths. So, if they've, like, with the internet now and they can keep the stats, if they need so many people to die during childbirth or so many people to die during surgery, and they see that they need that in the numbers, that guy, he gets on it, he makes his quotas, he's good. Then you have some people who need to get their numbers up in some way. Maybe his deadline's coming, end of the fiscal year. Is that April for him? I don't know. But he's got to get his numbers up. And what's a good way to get some numbers up? You sink some ships. This is before the budgeted nature of war, where they basically just keep billing stuff because it's just going on constantly. And the normal public doesn't even know what's going on, so it doesn't matter to them. It just comes out of their paychecks. They needed to get creative, and that's why Bill Burr's joke is like a weird, funny thing, but they could have been doing that. What if it's not about population control and it's just about death? One might say, like, oh, JP Morgan, he can't be that bad. Well, let's look at some of the other things that JP Morgan's done. So, like, during the Civil War, he didn't fight for the North or the South. He was in New York, so he probably would have been on the northern side, but instead of fighting in the war, he paid a substitute $300 to take his place. Okay, that's whatever. Like, you got the money, you don't want to go to war. Sure, that's fine on its own. But what actually ended up happening is JP Morgan also arranged a sale. Like, he bought up a bunch of surplus rifles. It was like this huge big deal. Just so you can look it up, Google JP Morgan rifle deal. But he bought a bunch of rifles at, like, from the US military, their current surplus at the time, for like $3.50 a piece. And then, like, the war really started kicking in, like, oh crap, we need these rifles. And JP Morgan sold them back to him for $22 a pop. That's some hardcore wartime profiteering. It's not even just that. He also, using like the telegraph or some technology, would send battle information back to his father, who was living in England at the time. And his father would use that information as sort of insider trading to buy war bonds and sell them, buy them low, sell them high over in England. So he was making profits based on the information he was being fed by his son in America. Yeah, someone doing that could probably sink a ship and not feel too bad about it if it somehow got him some cash. So what if it's not even just about, like, keeping the population low? Like, a lot of people, the New World Order, it's about keeping the population low, blah, blah, blah. What if that's just a side effect and the real goal is to just, Okay, so like the Aztecs sacrificed people to their gods all the time. Like, I think on average they said something like 20,000 people would be sacrificed in the Aztec world per year. That's just 20,000 people who are just like, yep, take my life. Or in most cases, I don't think they were, I don't know how many were willing. I don't know what the deal is there. But a lot of people were sacrificed. Now, I'm not saying that the Aztecs were right, but you can say, like, you believe in something, and the general idea is that you're supposed to accept that someone believes certain things. Even though it seems to be, seem to be not so accepting of that so much anymore. But say the Aztecs were right, and that their sacrifice of all these people per year was necessary, or that they were satiating some sort of weird blood god. Say they were right for a second. Now, if they are right, that means that there's some angry blood god out there that really wants his sacrifices. And what if all the richest people in the world, the people who really knows what's up, they know about this and they're trying to satiate those Aztec blood gods. In fact, that's the plot of a movie by Joss Whedon. I'm pretty sure. But what if Joss Whedon was right? Because what if these people in Hollywood, which is this weird blood-sucking culture in and of itself, what if they're aware and they're trying to give messages to the people through their works? Like James Cameron. What if James Cameron knows like all the real truths? Because he did the movie Titanic, and what if they had him do Titanic because he took his submarine down to the ocean and saw what was really going on with the Titanic, and they had to make sure that he told their story, because after he did like that stuff with like the abyss, he discovered the aliens down there too. So they get James Cameron to the Titanic, and James Cameron did the abyss where he discovered aliens living on the ocean floor. James Cameron also did the Terminator, which is about a future robot cyborg who goes back in time, which I'll go into some other time because I've got some theories about how our life is actually the Terminator. In Entourage, James Cameron directs an adaptation of Aquaman, which ends up being like one of the best movies in the world in that movie show-niverse. So movies. James Cameron did Titanic because he knew the whole story, because he'd actually been to the bottom of the ocean, because he has a submarine, and he found aliens with Ed O'Neill. But it really turned out that they're aliens, but they're blue, because you have to use avatars. James Cameron has a lot of movies about aliens. Most of his filmography is about aliens. What if JP Morgan's sacrificing people to Cthulhu? They say squids or octopuses might be aliens. They say that like everything came from the sea, so wouldn't like the oldest stuff be in the sea? Cthulhu's definitely down there. I want to see a big screen Cthulhu adaptation. What if the bit in Entourage about James Cameron directing Aquaman, the king of the Atlanteans, is just like an inside jab because everyone in Hollywood knows that James Cameron actually met the Atlanteans? It's really weird that James Cameron directed Titanic if you think about it, because he did Terminator, Aliens, The Abyss, Terminator 2, and True Lies. Which one of those movies made someone think, you know what? We needed that man. for our tragic love story. Maybe James Cameron discovered time travel at the bottom of the ocean floor, which gave him the capability of somehow getting the movie role so that he could explore under the ocean, so he could find time travel, so that he could get the movie role. So that he could go explore the ocean in a submarine to explore the Titanic, so that he could get time travel, so he could do the movie role.